In the dim silence of a small apartment bedroom, a man sits on the edge of his bed. The city outside hums with restless energy, but he feels none of it. His phone screen glows faintly in his hand, a portal to the messages that never come, the calls that never arrive, the attention he waits for, but never receives. Hours pass, and with each tick of the clock, his posture bends lower, as though the weight of invisibility itself presses against his chest. Earlier that night, he had spoken to her, timidly probing for reassurance, for warmth, for recognition of his efforts. She smiled distractedly, scrolling through her own device, nodding without listening. He tried again, offering kindness, offering words that hung in the air like fragile ornaments. They shattered instantly. Her indifference was a quiet blade, cutting deeper than overt cruelty ever could. And now he is left with the consequence of that moment, a gnawing sense that he does not matter, that he is invisible, that love itself is slipping through his fingers like water through a clenched fist. But this scene is not the tragedy it seems. It is a revelation. For what the man perceives as weakness, invisibility, humiliation, this is, in truth, a mask, a cover, a shroud beneath which power can grow in secret, if he has the courage to see it. There is an ancient rhythm in relationships that hides in plain sight. When she takes you for granted, when she forgets to notice your presence, when her eyes no longer sparkle at your efforts, she believes she sees you clearly. She believes you are predictable, safe, subdued. But this assumption, this blindness, is the perfect terrain for strategy. It is the veil under which Machiavelli himself would whisper, "If they believe you are harmless, then every move you make becomes more devastating, more impossible to anticipate. The promise I make is this: what feels like rejection, what feels like a diminishment of your value, can be turned into the sharpest blade of influence. To be underestimated is not a curse. It is a crown." And the thesis that will guide us through this labyrinth is simple yet absolute. When she takes you for granted, she gives you the perfect cover to execute your most calculated, most precise, and most devastating power move. Imagine the philosophy of concealment as an art. In war, the most feared general is not the one who charges headlong into battle with banners blazing, but the one whose movements cannot be tracked until his enemy is surrounded. In politics, the most enduring ruler is not the one who flaunts his strength openly, but the one who quietly maneuvers allies and adversaries alike until the throne is secured. In love, the same law applies. When her eyes glaze over, when she assumes she already knows every note of your song, that is when you gain the silence of the shadows. That is when your melody can change without her realizing, until suddenly it is she who dances to your rhythm. This is the hidden wisdom of the Machiavellian current. To use neglect as nourishment, to use invisibility as armor, to weaponize her assumptions as the very soil in which your new dominance will grow. What does it mean, then, to embrace being taken for granted? It means you no longer grasp at validation, no longer beg for recognition, no longer lose yourself in the desperate hunger for her attention. Instead, you let her look past you, let her believe she knows you, and in that blindness, you plant the seeds of transformation. But let us strip away the romantic illusions and examine the core of this philosophy. When Machiavelli wrote of rulers, he spoke of appearances. The prince must appear merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious, but in reality, he must be ready to act against all of these when necessity demands it. Translate this to the intimate battlefield. She sees a man who is steady, safe, perhaps even dull. But behind that veil, you cultivate silence, patience, calculation. She believes you are predictable. You become unpredictable. She assumes she has mapped the borders of your soul. You redraw the map in the shadows. She thinks you are static. You are already becoming something else. Ask yourself, what is more terrifying to the human psyche? The enemy who openly declares war, or the one who smiles, says nothing, and yet somehow shifts the balance of power without ever announcing his hand? Which man holds greater sway over the rhythms of desire, the one who demands attention, or the one who silently commands it by becoming the absence she cannot ignore? Here lies the alchemy of power. When she takes you for granted, she unknowingly gifts you the freedom to become invisible in her eyes. And invisibility is liberation. It frees you from the performance of constant reassurance. It frees you from the leash of her validation. And most importantly, it frees you to maneuver beneath the surface, to strike not with frantic desperation, but with surgical precision. You must see this clearly. Her neglect is not a sign of your weakness. It is the cloak of your ascension. Now the question becomes urgent. If being underestimated is the soil of power, how do you cultivate it? How do you take her indifference and transform it into the crucible of your dominance? The answer begins by understanding the deeper machinery of human psychology, the hidden architecture of male and female desire, and the way power flows silently beneath every relationship. But first, we must confront the true essence of invisibility, not as a curse, but as the most exquisite disguise a man could ever wear. Invisibility. That word alone chills most men to the bone. They equate it with irrelevance, with the nightmare of not being seen, not being chosen, not being desired. But let us dismantle this illusion. Invisibility is not erasure. Invisibility is freedom from scrutiny. When no one watches you, no one expects your next move. When no one suspects you, every action you take carries amplified impact. This is the same principle that allows the predator in the wild to crouch unnoticed in the tall grass until the very moment of the strike. The prey grazes peacefully, convinced of safety, until jaws close with absolute finality. So too, in the dance of masculine and feminine energy, invisibility is the hidden weapon. To be taken for granted is to be placed in the blind spot of her vision. She assumes she knows you. She assumes she has exhausted the map of your identity. She assumes your rhythms, your habits, your emotional offerings are static. And this assumption becomes her greatest vulnerability. For when a person ceases to look closely, they leave gaps wide enough to be filled with transformation. And the man who dares to transform in those shadows becomes something she cannot anticipate. Most men resist this position. They panic when they feel overlooked. They chase, they explain, they plead, they double their efforts to be recognized. This is the common response, the collapse into neediness. But every desperate attempt only confirms her belief that she has mastered the terrain of his soul. Every plea for validation is another brick in the wall of predictability. She knows exactly how he will react. He will chase, he will collapse, he will drown in the hunger for her gaze. And in that collapse, she holds all the power. The power response, however, is radically different. The power response is stillness. It is silence. It is the refusal to seek what is being withheld. It is to lean fully into invisibility, to treat it not as a wound, but as a weapon. When she assumes she has you measured, you cultivate your inner empire in secret. You develop new skills. You sharpen your physique. You refine your social arsenal. You expand your vision of the future. Outwardly, you appear unchanged, perhaps even disinterested, but beneath the surface, a tectonic shift occurs. And when the day comes that you reveal this transformation, it is not gradual, not expected, it is an earthquake. It shakes her certainty. It rewrites the unspoken contract of your relationship. This shift in perception is the essence of Machiavellian mastery. She thought she knew you. She thought she had mapped your soul. Suddenly, you are a stranger again. And the psychology of attraction thrives on mystery, on novelty, on the electric tension of uncertainty. By embracing being taken for granted, you create the space to reinvent yourself unseen. And when you reappear, you are not merely the man she overlooked. You are the man she underestimated, and that man is infinitely more powerful. But let us push deeper. What does it mean, philosophically, to live in the blind spot of another's perception? It means liberation from the tyranny of their gaze. It means you are no longer enslaved to their approval or disapproval. It means you no longer live as a reflection in her mirror. Instead, you live in the shadows, sculpting yourself according to your own design. And in those shadows, you discover a paradoxical truth. The less you clamor for recognition, the more gravity you acquire. The less you demand her attention, the more she wonders where it has gone. The less you perform for her, the more she feels the silent, unexplainable pull of your presence. Think of the night sky. The stars dazzle with brilliance, but it is the darkness, the vast and silent invisibility of space, that gives them meaning. Without the black void, the stars would not shine. In the same way, your invisibility gives weight to your eventual presence. Your absence gives fire to your return. Your silence makes your voice thunder when at last you choose to speak. This is the perfect cover for the Machiavellian move. While she looks past you, you gather strength. While she dismisses you, you refine your art. While she assumes you are static, you evolve. And when the moment comes to step from the shadows, you are not simply present, you are inevitable. Now let us pause. Let us ask the dangerous question. What is the ultimate consequence of this strategy? What happens when a man not only survives being taken for granted, but thrives within it, using it as the very cloak of his ascension? Does he merely regain her attention? Or does he discover something greater, that the true battlefield was never her gaze at all, but the empire of his own becoming? And if that is the truth, then perhaps the real power move is not simply to reclaim her recognition, but to transcend it entirely, to master the art of being underestimated not only in love, but in every arena of life. Consider the man who has embraced invisibility fully, not as a wound, but as armor. He walks into a room, and no one pauses, no one whispers his name, no one studies his movements. To the casual eye, he is ordinary, background, unthreatening. Yet within, he carries a secret fire. He knows that obscurity gives him freedom of movement. He knows that every underestimation is a shield. The world dismisses him, but he is coiling, preparing, gathering strength, and when he chooses to act, the magnitude of his strike is multiplied 100-fold precisely, because no one expected it. This is the Machiavellian advantage transposed onto the intimate battlefield. She does not expect you to rise, because she has filed you away in the drawer of predictability. That is your cover. That is your camouflage. Most men, when taken for granted, exhaust themselves in protest. They try to shout their importance back into existence. They shower her with validation, believing that if they prove their devotion louder, she will awaken to their worth. But this is weakness masquerading as love. It is need disguised as loyalty. And the cruel paradox is that the louder he screams for recognition, the more deaf she becomes to his voice. She withdraws further, convinced that she has conquered every corner of his being. The stronger response is to invert the dynamic entirely, to embrace the cold silence of neglect as if it were oxygen, to stop chasing her gaze and redirect all energy towards self-forging. You shift your focus inward, not outward. Every day becomes a training ground. Your body is sharpened through discipline. Your intellect is fortified with knowledge. Your spirit is tempered through solitude. And because she assumes you are static, because she no longer looks too closely, she cannot see the storm you are becoming. You use her indifference as the very soil in which your power grows unseen. Then comes the revelation, the day when the invisible suddenly becomes undeniable. She thought she could read your every page, but she realizes with a jolt that a whole new volume has been written in the dark. You stand differently. You speak with a weight that was absent before. You carry yourself not as the man begging for her recognition, but as the man who no longer needs it. That shift, subtle, internal, seismic, is what destabilizes her certainty. It shakes her assumptions. It makes her question what she missed, what she overlooked, what she allowed to slip away while she was busy taking you for granted. Do you see the power in this? To let yourself be underestimated is to give yourself permission to evolve without interference. It is to cloak yourself in the quiet that others mistake for stagnation, while in reality you are engineering metamorphosis. This is why Machiavelli's wisdom endures across centuries. Power is not only in the display of strength, but in the timing of its revelation. A blade shown too early dulls its edge. A blade hidden until the decisive moment becomes unstoppable. But the strategy does not stop at transformation alone. It deepens into the psychology of attraction itself. Women are not drawn to the man who performs endlessly for their attention. They are drawn to the man who stands apart, who does not bend his entire existence to the orbit of their recognition. And when she takes you for granted, you are given the rare opportunity to prove this truth. You cease to orbit her. You cease to revolve around her gaze. Instead, you stand as your own gravitational center. She feels the shift before she understands it. She feels the silence like a void pulling her inward. And suddenly, she cannot take you for granted anymore, because you are no longer the man she assumed you were. So the paradox emerges clearly. Being taken for granted is not the end of power. It is the beginning of it. It is not the collapse of value. It is the cover under which value is reforged. When she overlooks you, you are liberated to become unpredictable. When she dismisses you, you are freed to sharpen your edge. When she assumes you have no surprises left, you become the embodiment of surprise itself. But here we arrive at the deeper and more dangerous question. If invisibility is this potent, if being underestimated is this fertile a soil, why limit it to romance alone? Why not carry this principle into every dimension of life, into business, into politics, into war with yourself? Why not allow the entire world to take you for granted, only to erupt from the shadows with a power they never imagined you possessed? And if that is the true trajectory of this philosophy, then perhaps the art of being taken for granted is not merely a tactic, it is the foundation of a life strategy. A strategy where you no longer fear neglect, but harness it, where you no longer crave recognition, but weaponize invisibility, where you no longer collapse when overlooked, but rise precisely because of it. So ask yourself this: will you continue to beg for her gaze, to live as a slave to recognition, to crumble when you are unseen? Or will you embrace invisibility as your cloak, underestimation as your fortress, and silence as the drumbeat of your ascension? The truth begins to sharpen now, cutting through the illusions men carry like chains. You must understand that this strategy, this weaponization of neglect, is not about her at all. It is about you. Every man who collapses under the weight of being taken for granted reveals his dependency. He reveals that his entire identity is still tied to the trembling thread of another's attention. And as long as you live chained to that thread, you will remain a prisoner, not a sovereign. But when you sever it, when you allow yourself to vanish in her eyes without protest, you finally begin to stand on your own ground. This is the great inversion. Most believe that visibility equals power. They think that to be seen, praised, admired is the essence of influence. But Machiavelli whispers different gospel. True power lies not in being constantly visible, but in being capable of appearing and disappearing at will. The ruler who parades his strength without pause invites rebellion. The ruler who conceals his movements, who reveals only what serves his purpose, cultivates mystery and fear. Translate this into the intimate arena. When she always sees you trying, always sees you reaching, always sees you performing, she grows numb. But when you recede, when you allow yourself to disappear into silence, she cannot map you anymore. That absence becomes the question she cannot answer. And questions, not answers, are what stir desire. Now we must descend into the deeper architecture of male and female psychology. Women are drawn to certainty and security, but they are ignited by uncertainty and desire. This is the paradox that governs attraction. A man who is always available, always predictable, becomes safe but unremarkable. She may respect him, but she does not burn for him. The man who carries mystery, who withdraws without explanation, who transforms without warning, destabilizes her assumptions. He becomes a puzzle, and the feminine mind, restless by nature, cannot resist a puzzle. When she takes you for granted, she is closing the book she believes she has already finished reading. Your task is to write new chapters in silence, so that one day she discovers this story is not over. But make no mistake, this is not manipulation for its own sake. It is not about games. It is about reclaiming sovereignty. Because what most men do not realize is that the hunger for constant recognition is a form of enslavement. When she is your only mirror, you are no longer a man, you are a reflection. And reflections do not command, they beg. The Machiavellian move is to break this mirror entirely, to stand unreflected, to shape yourself without her gaze, to evolve in the silence she provides by ignoring you. And here lies the cruel beauty of the strategy. When you cease needing her recognition, you paradoxically regain it. Because desire cannot be compelled, it emerges from tension, from polarity, from the magnetic field between presence and absence. By embracing being taken for granted, you shift the polarity. You stop orbiting her. She begins unconsciously to orbit you. She wonders where your attention has gone, what you are thinking, why your silence feels heavier than words. The energy reverses, the dynamic tilts, and suddenly, the man once overlooked has become the axis around which her curiosity spins. Do you see how profound this is? To be dismissed is not the end, but the seed. To be overlooked is not a death, but a rebirth. Every moment she takes you for granted is an invitation to vanish into your own becoming, to return sharper, stronger, more enigmatic. And every time you resist the urge to chase, to beg, to protest, you prove something far greater than your worth to her. You prove your sovereignty to yourself. But the question must be asked, what happens if she never notices? What if she remains blind, content in her assumptions, indifferent even to the transformation taking place? This is where the deeper revelation emerges. The strategy was never about her. The perfect cover is not only for the power move within the relationship, it is for the power move within your life. To be taken for granted by one woman or by many is irrelevant if you have built yourself into a force so undeniable that the world itself bends to your gravity. Her blindness does not diminish you. It only spares you the distraction of her gaze while you forge something greater. And this brings us to the razor's edge. When you accept invisibility, when you harness neglect, when you master the art of being underestimated, you transcend dependence on any single relationship. You become dangerous not because she cannot read you, but because no one can. You walk the earth as a cipher, a man whose moves are hidden until the moment of revelation. That is the essence of Machiavellian power, not constant display, but selective revelation. So I ask you directly, are you willing to stop clawing at the walls of her indifference? Are you willing to stop performing for her distracted eyes? Are you willing to sit in the silence, to let yourself be overlooked, to allow the pain of invisibility to become the crucible of your transformation? If you can, then you will no longer be the man taken for granted. You will be the man she and the world underestimated. And the man who is underestimated is the man who cannot be stopped. Then let us advance into the crucible where philosophy becomes flesh, where theory collides with the raw machinery of male and female psychology. Because ideas without application are smoke, and you are not here for smoke. You are here for fire. First, we must confront the hidden dynamic of the feminine mind. A woman takes you for granted, not because she despises you, but because she assumes ownership of your energy. She assumes your presence will remain constant, like the walls of her home or the ground beneath her feet. She ceases to question it, ceases to notice it, because certainty dulls the senses. Familiarity makes even the rarest treasure feel common. This is not malice. It is nature. The feminine grows numb when stimulation vanishes, when surprise evaporates, when a man reveals every card in his hand and then plays them endlessly, begging for the same applause. She is not cruel for overlooking you. She is simply following the gravitational law of desire. What is fully owned is no longer fully desired. Most men, enslaved by instinct, answer this neglect with more attention. They double their gifts, their words, their availability. They pour themselves like water into a vessel that has already overflowed. And she, overwhelmed by the excess, pulls further away. This is the spiral of collapse, the cycle of masculine desperation. The more he gives, the less she feels. The less she feels, the more he panics. And each desperate act engraves deeper into her mind the most lethal assumption of all. He will never leave. He will never change. He will never command. But the power response is not to protest. The power response is not to withdraw affection in petty retaliation. The true power response is to shift the gravitational center. When she takes you for granted, you use that invisibility as your cloak to redirect your energy. You stop flooding her with presence. You stop feeding her with constant reassurance. You redirect that energy into becoming more formidable, more independent, more self-contained. You become a storm gathering just beyond her horizon, unannounced yet undeniable. And this shift does not scream. It whispers. It is not theatrical. It is tectonic. The effect on her psychology is profound. At first, she may not notice. She continues in her assumptions, thinking you are still the same man orbiting her sun. But slowly, subtly, something shifts. Your gaze is not as frequent. Your availability is no longer guaranteed. Your attention has weight, but it is given selectively, sparingly, with deliberate precision. She begins to feel an absence, a gap, a void where once there was endless supply, and that void creates hunger. What was once taken for granted now becomes scarce, and scarcity is the engine of desire. The shift in perception follows. She no longer sees you as static, predictable, conquered. She sees the outline of something mysterious moving within the silence. She wonders where your energy is going, who else may feel it, what purpose it is serving beyond her. She begins to chase questions, not answers. And in this chase, she feels once again the pulse of attraction that had faded. You did not force it. You did not beg for it. You created the conditions for it to resurrect itself by removing yourself from the pedestal of her assumptions. Now pause and expand this beyond the relationship. The same psychology governs the battlefield of business, of leadership, of social power. A man constantly demanding recognition exhausts his audience. A man who works in silence, who unveils transformation only when the time is ripe, captures attention with exponential force. Scarcity and mystery amplify value in every arena of life. This is why invisibility, when weaponized, becomes not a curse but a strategy. It is the discipline to withhold, to bide your time, to cultivate strength beneath the surface until revelation itself becomes a shockwave. Do you see the elegance of this maneuver? By allowing yourself to be taken for granted, you are not conceding defeat. You are securing the perfect terrain for your rise. You are cultivating unpredictability. You are transforming neglect into a cloak of power. And when the moment comes, you do not beg her to notice. You force her to feel the weight of what she overlooked. This raises the sharper question, one you must ask yourself with ruthless honesty. Can you withstand the silence long enough to let it transform you? Can you endure being overlooked without collapsing into the desperate hunger to be seen? Because only the man who embraces the void without fear can turn it into his forge. Only the man who accepts invisibility can return as the figure she and the world cannot ignore. Then let us press forward into the final crucible where this philosophy fuses into identity, where strategy ceases to be a tactic and becomes the marrow of who you are. Because in the end, this is not about her indifference. It is not about her blindness. It is not about a single relationship at all. It is about what kind of man you will be when the world overlooks you, when your value is doubted, when you are underestimated by those around you. To be underestimated is to walk with the cloak of shadows wrapped around your shoulders. It means the world does not prepare its defenses against you, because it assumes you are harmless. It means competitors reveal their hand openly, never expecting that yours has been concealed until the decisive strike. It means you are free to maneuver unseen, to build unseen, to sharpen unseen, until the moment comes when revelation is not merely surprising, it is devastating. This is the essence of the Machiavellian power move. The art of selective revelation, the mastery of timing, the refusal to announce your strength until the moment it cannot be ignored. Now think of how this principle reshapes your very identity. The man who once begged to be seen no longer cares who is watching. The man who once lived as a reflection now lives as the source. The man who once collapsed under neglect now stands within neglect as if it were his fortress. And from that fortress, he plans, he builds, he waits. The silence that once suffocated him now feeds him. The invisibility that once broke him now protects him. He is no longer the man taken for granted. He is the man who cannot be measured until it is too late. And yet, here lies the razor edge of the lesson. When you master invisibility, you also master detachment. You cease to be enslaved by outcomes. Whether she notices or not becomes irrelevant. Whether she chases or not becomes secondary. Because your transformation was never for her. It was never for validation. It was for sovereignty. And sovereignty means this: you are whole without her recognition. You are complete with or without her desire. You are dangerous with or without her approval. This is the final inversion, the point where strategy transcends manipulation and becomes identity. You no longer perform Machiavellian tactics to win her attention. You embody them because they are the laws of power itself. You embrace invisibility because it is freedom. You accept being underestimated because it is protection. You use neglect as your crucible because it is the surest path to becoming unignorable. And when you reach this point, something extraordinary happens. She feels it. Whether she admits it or not, she senses the gravitational shift. The same man she once overlooked now stands before her as something unrecognizable, calm, composed, untouchable. His presence no longer begs, it commands. His silence no longer feels like weakness, it radiates control. And though she may attempt to take him for granted again, she finds she cannot, because he no longer offers himself so cheaply. His time is scarce. His attention is rare. His essence is sovereign. Now the final question burns before you like fire. Which identity will you claim? Will you remain the man who collapses under invisibility, who drowns in the hunger to be seen, who lives as a reflection in another's eyes? Or will you ascend into sovereignty, embracing neglect as your cloak, invisibility as your fortress, and underestimation as your weapon? The choice is not hers. It has never been hers. It is yours. You can continue clawing for recognition, begging to be validated, announcing your worth like a street vendor crying out in the market. Or you can embrace the silence, vanish into the shadows, cultivate your empire unseen, and emerge when the time is ripe as the man no one expected, but everyone must acknowledge. This is the Machiavellian move. This is the revelation. When she takes you for granted, do not resist. Do not panic. Do not beg. Let her overlook you. Let her assume you are finished. Let her believe she has read every page of your soul. Because in that very assumption, in that blindness, she hands you the perfect cover to become something greater than she could ever imagine. And when you return from the shadows, you will not simply be seen. You will be undeniable. That is the final edict. The overlooked man has two fates, to die as a reflection or to rise as a sovereign. The choice is now before you. Choose.